Hello, everyone. I want to thank everyone who's live here tonight, showing up, already here. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here right now. I always ask in the very beginning if, for those of you who are online already, just to quickly just type in yes if you can hear me, because we've done one of these before and we got a little way through and then people couldn't, which is a little bit of a disaster. So just if you can, pop and say yes and hello and thank you for everyone who is. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go through heaps of content and we're going to go really quickly. And I'm going to be a little bit amped. And I hope you enjoy that energy. Do your best to please be focused on this material. I know it's so easy with have Facebook and emails and everything, but it will distract you. And some of this information is going to be super important to you. Some of you who will be watching this either live or later on the replay, you know me. You're already my clients. You've already been to previous webinars. And for those of you who don't, I'm just going to spend a minute just to kind of give you an introduction of who I am and why I'm talking about anxiety and the myths and why I have a different perspective and how I got here and how I can help you tonight. Because although we're going to talk about the myths, common myths about anxiety, I want you to think for a second, what is a myth? And we're going to talk with the let's just say for the first one, for example, if you have anxiety, you'll have it for the rest of your life. And the reason why these are so important is because if you accept that, that becomes your belief system. And if you don't know yet, but your beliefs are so important in your quality of life and your well-being. And so whatever beliefs that you have around, can you get well? Can you get better? Ooh, okay, it really affects your quality of life and if you can make change and transformation. And we're going to get back into that very shortly. If you guys have questions, feel free to type them in. I'm not going to get them until the very end of the webinar because I want to stay focused on the material, but please do ask questions and I will get back to it. Okay, so I started working with people about 10 years ago. And in that time, it was mainly a wellness practice, and we were focusing helping people with a lot of conditions triggered by stress, mainly musculoskeletal challenges and all sorts of things like that. Then people started referring, their friends who had anxiety and asking if I could help. To me, it made sense because anxiety is just a stress response in the nervous system, that fight or flight. So I'm like, sure, made sense. The interesting thing was before I even really knew that much about anxiety, before I really dived in, it was just obvious to me we could help people. Didn't even think of it. And then people started saying, I tried all these things before and nothing has worked. It's so amazing. I always felt like my whole life I was walking around eggshells, and all of a sudden I feel different in the world. So this is exciting. Anyway, I started doing more and more and more of it because I like working with people who have anxiety, because generally you've got a hunger to learn a strategy and to say, well, how can I implement that in my life? And then what can I do in my life so I can feel better tomorrow? And I love that attitude. Sometimes when you're working with people with depression or back pain or neck pain, we just want the thing gone. As you do with anxiety, you just want it gone. But it's like people often just wanted to blame their body. Whereas the magical thing in anxiety is a lot of people are aware that it's often caused by a stress response. And so there's a knowing that, hey, maybe I need to do something in my own thoughts and my own behaviors to make my day better tomorrow and the next day. Okay, so then I started working with all these people, and I made all these insights and distinctions. And every now and then I'd have a conversation with someone, and we'd say something, and there'd be that magical moment when everything just clicked. And it's like, if you've got like a padlock and you've got two of the combination, this is a 6, you're not 6, and this was a 3, and the other one, you're not quite sure what it is, but all of a sudden you get it right and it opens, and that's what it was like for people, like a certain conversation and there's like a different idea, and then so much would change in their life. And so I started collecting all these, and then I wrote the book, How to Break Free from Anxiety. And the reason why I wrote it was I thought it would be like a really good manual for my clients as they kind of had care. They had like a reference point, something to do. And we just put so much information in there. And that was really, really kind of helpful for a lot of people. So working with people more and more with anxiety, but I'm not a traditional person who helps with what you'd think of when you go to someone who has anxiety, because you go to a medical doctor first and they'll probably medicate you or refer you out to a psychologist or a therapist. And I've had so many clients who've taken drugs, not worked, spent so long talking to their therapists or their psychologists, and they just said they're bored of talking. They get to the end, even if it was helpful, they get to the range, the limit, and they're like, I want something else. I want a strategy. I want something new. What can I do? And then some people have tried breathing techniques and then all sorts of things. We're going to go all through this now. See, I didn't know that anxiety wasn't meant to be cured. I didn't know that if you had it, you'd have it for the rest of your life. It didn't make any sense to me. I've always thought this. I thought, I had a client and they've lived maybe 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden, one day, something triggers the anxiety attack, or all of a sudden they start getting more anxious, or whatever starts happening in their life. And then after that point, things get like far worse, and things all of a sudden get intensified. And so many people say, when I realized I had anxiety, that's often when I actually started getting worse. Like I didn't realize I had it, but once I figured it out, or someone said to me, maybe you've got anxiety, at that point I realized how much I had it. For so many people, that's when it actually gets worse, because the label that you give the anxiety, oh, I've got it, can be a powerful first step, but then it starts owning you, especially if it becomes your identity and you say, I have anxiety. So to me, this was really interesting, watching people when they would say and connect to themselves as being an anxious person. Because the way I look at it, you're just a person, you're just a human, you have a nervous system, too much stress in the nervous system, and you go into this kind of fight or flight mode. You take someone that could be chilled, all of a sudden you get like a needle and you jab adrenaline into their body, they're going to be in this amped up state. Now, for anxious people, not that there's really such a thing, but people who are often triggered into these responses, it can be a simple idea, it can be a thought, it can be an environment, it can be an uncomfortable situation. I have people who get so worked up about maybe doing a public speech. Before it's even happened, months, they just think there's a possibility it might happen. Just that thought alone can create so much tension in their body. Or people who have a specific phobia about maybe like going in the lift. The idea that they might need to go in a lift fills their body with such chemicals that there's just a full-on response. And so if they're having a phobia, or if there's a social situation that triggers it, or if they're just randomly out of the blue with the panic attacks, what seems out of the blue, what happens is there is a trigger. There is something triggering the nervous system to have this response. If you're not always having it, it means there's a trigger. And so if you took away the trigger, you're going to have a different response. Maybe you're not going to have the response anymore. So that's an interesting thing. So if someone has gone for years and years, most of their life, no anxiety, then all of a sudden they have it for a long period of time. They tried all these things and nothing works. It can be really damaging when that person goes to see an expert and they're told over and over again by different people that everyone has anxiety and you'll have it the rest of your life and you just have to learn to live with it. It makes me so crazy. I did this testimonial story. It's on my Facebook page. You can probably look for it if you want, with this client. And it was a great story. She was told one day, she had this crazy panic attack. She thought she was dying. She ran to the hospital. And the specialist, after doing all these like heart checks and everything, just told her that she would have anxiety for the rest of her life and she had to learn to live with it. And that was true for her. 30 years later, she meets me. But, and then, the story changes because she no longer has it. That's why she's doing the story. But the interesting thing is the amount of people that she had tried to get help for in the past often kept having that belief themselves. And everyone's approach for her was, you're just going to have to learn to live with it. I didn't even think that was a possibility when working with her. So in my mind, working with her, it was only a matter of time before she broke out of it, before she figured out in her nervous system how to calm everything down. Amazing. So she's in my office one day, and I have a new client who's just come in because she's just been told by a psychologist who she met like the week before me that she's going to have it forever. And that thought, which she never even thought about at that stage, was so scary to her. It took her low level anxiety to a high level of anxiety, just going, oh my God, what is this thing? Now, so what happens is these beliefs or myths, they can come from people. It can come from an expert or a teacher or other people. I have a client. She did amazingly. She was getting so good, and she was just living in this really good space after suffering quite badly. She noticed her friend was suffering pretty bad, with much the same symptoms that she was not so long ago. And so she talks to her friend about it. And she suggests that to her friend. Maybe her friend comes and sees me, and we can work with some ideas and strategies to help her friend learn some new tools. Her friend's response was, it can't really work because everyone has anxiety. You just have to learn to live with it. What makes that story worse is that particular student was studying psychology, clinical psychology. So you just know when they get out and into the world, they're probably going to have that view and share that with their clients. Now, not every therapist thinks the same way, and I'm not talking for everyone, and not everyone holds this belief. But if you do, how can you get well? And then it's just an interesting thing to think about. So I love it when the person who thinks that they have to have it forever, but when they stop and think, wait a minute, there's been times in my life where I don't have it. What happens if I could stretch out the times when I don't have it? Make them more and more and more. The times when I do, make it less and less and less, or to the point of nothing. Wouldn't that be ideal? And so the reason why I see it as a myth is because I've seen people who have had it and then overcome it. Simple. That's actually pretty much how, for all of these myths, I don't really believe them, is because what I've seen in my clinic. Another real common myth is that it's caused by your thinking. And a lot of people say anxiety is all in your head. And anxiety is a nervous system response. It's your brain. It's your whole physiology when it gets in that fight or flight, or something triggers that fight or flight. Maybe it's an appropriate stimulus, but whatever, it's like, then you're in it. Sometimes, and often, it's caused or made worse by your thinking, but not always. And so a lot of the people, especially, for example, people who've got generalized anxiety disorder, it's that constant feeling, that constant buzz or intense feeling like you're always on edge, you're always worrying. For some people, it's not so much the always worrying. It's just this buzzing feeling, or this uncomfortable, that feeling of walking on eggshells, so to speak, that's always going on for them. And those people, what happens is their nervous system is stuck in what we call a defense physiology. And so they're on hypervigilant mode or an alert mode. And in that state, their body's not at ease. And so for them, their thinking of stress-related thoughts of what could go wrong and everything else is coming because the body's in the state. And if your body's in the state, it's going to affect your mind. And so by when we release and work with the body and open it up, then the mind also shifts. But if you don't also address the mind, and the mind's what triggers you into it, then it's only a matter of time. So thinking is incredibly important, but it's not being caused only by your mind. And so I think what happens is too many people make these generalizations. And when you make these big generalizations about things in your life, it's harder to always break through out of that problem, because you're not really seeing the events as they are. You're just getting caught up in the generalization. Now, that's a big concept. We don't really have time to go into it. So maybe go back and listen to that a few times and see if you can pick bits out of that. There's a lot in that. People who are watching this and have been to the web, some of my webinars before we go into that detail, you'll get how important that statement is. So, myth 3, you have to learn to breathe properly. Well, I've had so many people who come to me and they've tried breathing techniques from all sorts of different places. Now, the reason they're coming to me in my clinic is because learning those particular strategies has not worked for them. In fact, for some people, they now learn a way that I have to breathe, maybe. And there's different people say different things, which really interests me. especially I know of two whole schools of thought, which almost say the exact opposite thing. And what's more interesting, they've both got really amazing science backing up why they're right. And you listen to the logic behind it, and both times you kind of go, wow. I always say, you look at little kids, kids just know how to breathe, right? If we just kind of like, we breathe faster when we're running, when we're like more relaxed, our breathing changes and slows down. It should be and can be an involuntary process that happens all the time, whatever. But you can become conscious of your breath. If you're worried about your breath and what it should be like, and you're activating that fear response by going and always paying attention to it, it's not going to be a mindfulness exercise of relaxation if you're seeing it through the lens and the filter of anxiety, of is it wrong? Oh my God, and what if? Because then you're already putting it into yourself into a state just by observing your breath. So I've had so many people saying, I was obsessing about my breathing and it caused me to have even more kind of troubles. And so what happens is, of course, if you have tension bound in your body because of other life stresses and traumas, and you have more and more and more, your spine becomes rigid. The spine in the front where the ribs meet. And so now trying to breathe, take a deeper breath, it's hard because there's all that tension bound in there. So naturally, of course, what's going to happen is you're going to have a smaller, shallower breath. And then what happens is you can easily start going into hyperventilation syndrome, which can trigger all sorts of horrible kind of things like panic attacks and other types of stimulating your nervous system into kind of anxious kind of mode. And so they say, you got to breathe a certain way. Well, we have a different approach to say, well, if you can kind of go and like learn how to kind of relax yourself from the inside out, then all of a sudden your breathing naturally changes because your state changes and you go into a state of more ease. And that is such a different way about doing it rather than trying to consciously focus on your breath all time through the day. I think most people do like 12 breaths a minute. That's a lot to think about all day, every day. And so once again, it's an approach that obviously works for some people. But if everyone, what happens is they're trying to force themselves into the mold of everyone else of what you should do and how you should breathe and how you should think, it's probably not what's right for you, because what's right for you, what strategies that you need may be specific for you. One of the things I like to do is help you, give you some concepts, give you some tools, gives you a different way of thinking about it. And just you fill in the blanks with your experience. So often we'll have a conversation about something and it becomes almost a metaphor. And you kind of go out and explore and become aware of what are your triggers. Okay. Well, at that point, you're becoming more conscious of what your triggers are. And for each of you who's listening, it'll probably be very different. And that's one of the things that I find so fascinating about anxiety is, I might meet a few new people every kind of day in my clinic, and they'll talk to me and they'll just say, oh, I've got really bad anxiety. Can you help me? And I'll say, well, describe it to me. And the words that they use to describe their experience is completely different from one person to the next. And I'm looking at all these people and I'm kind of going, I understand from their perspective, they've all got anxiety, you've all got it. But what is this word? What is this thing that you all have? And so when you can understand that you've got these experiences, and then just by looking at them in a different way, it can change your experience. It's powerful. It's very, very powerful. And forcing yourself to breathe a certain way to change your state is a very powerful thing to do. But if you're always trying to force yourself to control and stop your anxiety, you're constantly thinking about trying to stop and control your anxiety. One of the things, a lot of clients come to me and they want management tools and they want to be able to kind of learn to deal with their anxiety. And I would much rather play a different game always. And I'm always saying, if I was to teach you a tool to manage your anxiety, what would happen is you'd lessen it. And that'd be good. But you have to keep doing those tools to lessen it. Because as soon as you stop doing whatever you're doing, it will just flare up again. And that's how so many people live life. If they've gone to all these sorts of different things like CBT and whatever, you learn some great strategies for managing it. And so as long as you're doing it, you're fine. As soon as you stop, oh no, it can flare up, which is really I don't think ideal. I'm always saying, okay, if you're living this way and you've got anxiety, what happens if you learn to kind of live in a different way? One that was just naturally so much better. You're so preoccupied with doing different things in your life, your focus was different. See, if you're listening and you're someone who didn't have anxiety in a period of your life, was a lot of people with anxiety didn't. Some people have always had it from earliest they can remember. If you're one of the people who had a period in life before it started and you never had it, where was your focus? What were you thinking about? Because if you think at the moment, when you've really got anxiety, it's really bad, you're often thinking about it. You're spending so much time thinking about it, not wanting it. When will it happen? What will happen if I'm in this situation? It flares up and it becomes quite consuming. And the more you do it, the more you feed into that. And so management strategies sometimes just feed into that as well. And so what we want to do is play a different game and say, okay, rather than feeding into it, what happens if I feed something else, like a new way of being? It's a really cool thought, and I just want you to ponder that. What would you think about when you had it, when you were free from it in a different time of life? Where was your focus? And this method's a common one as well. It's you need to take drugs to manage anxiety. And I don't like that one a lot for a few reasons. Look, if you need to take drugs, if they're helpful short term, great. Isn't it cool that we have access to them? But I've seen so many people who have taken drugs and it's just caused them to be numb, or it's not worked, or there's been some bizarre adverse side effects, some kind of bad reactions. And often the person's told different things, but I've had clients who have had a bad reaction and the doctor just told them to take more or just pass and push through it. And it's really interesting how many people I've been able to help come off medication. And the commonly describe it as like a numbness or just not feeling who they were. Look, I mean, if that's what you need and nothing else has worked, amazing. And if it works, cool. I'm often not seeing it work. People who are coming into my clinic have tried it and it's not worked for them. And so saying, or they just don't want to be on the medication, even if it has worked. For some people it has, but they don't want to have to take this thing every day. They want to be free. And so many do that, make the transition where you kind of break out of it. And the reason is because we've just retrained the nervous system. Remember, you're not anxious because you don't have a lack of whatever that drug is in your body. The reason why you're doing it is because your body's having some response. On that note, I do have a point to make. There's so many different causes of anxiety. Majority of the time, like 99%, it's to do with stress and to do with one's thinking and physiology and all that stuff we're talking about. The other 1% of time, it's to do with things, for example, all sorts of kind of pathologies that could be going on in your body. And it's an interesting thing to say, and I don't want to scare you guys who are listening to go, do I have that? Because like majority of the time you don't. But sometimes it can be just like vitamin B12, like an anemia deficiency. But often you'd go to your doctor when you have it and you do the blood test and your Kenner rules all these things out. And there's all sorts of random things out there. Gluten intolerance can cause it. And the list goes on and on. There's lots of things that can cause it and the symptoms of it are huge. But almost always it's stress related. So sometimes in certain situations, and like when someone has some other challenges in life, let's say the very maybe an autistic person, then often what happens is that can kind of create a higher anxiety. And so there are many different things out there that cause anxiety. And so sometimes by doing what we're going to do and like learn to kind of shift the way you're thinking will work for like so many people, almost everyone, but not everyone, not the people who it is a pathology or there was something else going on. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear to all you guys. I'm pretty sure the people who are listening, almost all of you, if not all of you, it'll be mainly triggered by other things going on. So if anyone has any questions, now would be an amazing time to ask while I have a drink of water. But I guess no one's that fast at typing, so I'll give you a few more moments. I had a client come in the other day, and hopefully she's watching now. She says, "Oh, I saw your webinar, and I looked at all those myths." She says, "I have them all." Whew, that's interesting. Um, we hear them all the time. They're really interesting. I have no reason to believe any of them because of what I've seen in my clinic. See, beliefs and myths are similar. If you believe the myth, then it becomes your belief. And if, as we said earlier, and then if that's your belief, it's going to affect how you do things. For example, if you went to a place and you thought, let's say you knew that this particular approach would be the thing that was going to make all the difference in your life. Compare that to the person who went, "Oh, nothing works anyway. What's the point? I've tried everything and nothing works." Now, what happens is when the same person has the same experience, all of a sudden it's been filtered through the mind, and there'll be a very different reaction on the inside of their bodies. So, how can you have an open mind for change? That's why I put the testimonials on my website. That's why we do those little stories of people. So when people kind of look and we hear other people's stories, they kind of go, "Oh, that was similar to me. Huh, maybe I can have a similar response." Does it make sense, right? Now, I'm very grateful that I never got trained the original kind of way about anxiety through being a psychologist or a doctor, because I've spoken to quite a few, and the way they look at it's obvious to me why they can't produce the results that they want. Because one, they don't have the skill set, and from my perspective, and two, their view is often limiting. See, if I was your practitioner or your helper or your whatever, and you came to me and I thought that you needed to have it for the rest of your life, how good can our connection be? It doesn't make sense to me. Because I've helped so many people, I know what's possible, right? And the interesting thing is getting you to become aware of what's possible within yourself. When you start making that connection, you have those aha moments. Wow, that's when it gets super exciting, because then things in life start changing. You look at things differently. You start having a different experience. So that's really interesting. Okay, cool. So there's two parts of today. One, to kind of learn to kind of how to break through myths, and some of just talk about them from a different perspective. One thing I want to share with you now is about a year ago in my clinic, just over a year ago, I started a course called Wellness Mindset Mastery, and I loved it. And we had all these different people, and they came in and they, participated in a course for 12 weeks. The course was webinars exactly like this, except people asked me questions and I'd answer the questions and kind of revolve it kind of around certain topics. For example, the very first one, which I believe in some ways is the best one because it sets the scene up for everything. So many people focus on what they don't want, and you get more of what you reinforce. And so you say, "I don't want anxiety," and how to get rid of it. Some people wake up in the morning and go, "Is it still there?" And they look for it and they find it. And we keep saying, "I don't want my experience and I don't want my symptoms." And why won't it go away? And the dialogue. And we're so stuck in our experience. And because you're stuck in that experience, all you're doing is recreating that experience. And by recreating the experience, it hurts. And so the very best you can do from that limited mindset is say, what can I do to push that away? Therefore, you look for management strategies. And as we said before, then I have to put all this effort into pushing something away. And then often it comes back. And so that's people's experience, or they just say, that's where it is. Deal with it and just carry on in life. And so the very first thing that we did in this course was a process which I call the wellness shift, which has helped people learn how to orient themselves and create if you will, a new perspective or new consciousness, a new way of being. As we talked about before, if you can see how you're stuck inside the world that's creating all the problems and pain and suffering and symptoms, and learn to break out of it and hold a different perspective for long enough, then all of a sudden you're so busy being in life that way, those problems of the past are no longer there. And so each week we'd focus on something like that. There's a very powerful thing. Your mind focuses, the questions that you ask focus your mind. Okay. So if you're saying, what's wrong with me? Why won't this go away? What can I do to get rid of this? It's a very different type of question that you're asking than someone who's saying, okay, what can I do to calm down my nervous system? What can I do to kind of be more resilient? What can I do to minimize the stresses? Because I've grown to such a capacity that I can grow from these situations, for example. And I'm not telling you what to think. Never want to do that. I just want to help you become aware that sometimes if you're thinking, for example, some people are always looking for tension in their body. So they're kind of going, I've always got tension. They're always looking for it. So right now, for example, if you guys are just to kind of pay attention to your hands, just notice your hands, wherever they are, whatever they're doing. And pretty much most of you probably weren't aware of what your hands felt like before I asked you. But you put your focus there, and then you've got the awareness, which is fine. It doesn't mean anything. But if you're focusing in on the symptom and you don't like it and you've got a judgment about it. So anyway, what happens is over a period of 12 weeks, each week we focus on one specific concept, sometimes a few concepts. And then I send everyone back out into the world and they experience what it's like to think about that, hold that new thing and use a few of the tools from earlier weeks. And they keep exploring and come back with feedback about what's changing. And I was blown away by the massive transformations that people were making. And I'm talking about huge. I'm thinking how much can one learn from these online things? Like really. But the feedback I was getting from my clients was ridiculous. That when the course finished, when my clients were coming to me, I'm like, do the course as well as coming to have sessions with me. And I wasn't really sure what kind of response that was going to get, if it was going to make a little bit of difference or a lot of difference. And what happened is it was huge. It was amazing. The reason why is often in my practice, I do mainly body work with a little bit of talking. And every now and then a client would be stuck or that broke, a point where the things aren't working. Then we'd have a one-on-one. And one-on-ones with me, $150, like 30 minutes long. There's only so much time. There's only so much we can cover in that time. And there's not many spaces because of how I work. And so sometimes it takes a long time for people to get the content. And I was noticing that I was saying the same things over and over again, sometimes at different points, but it was like, rather than an idea, it was like a principle. And once the person learned the principle, all of a sudden things started changing for them. And so that's why I realized this course was so powerful, because it's all about principles, about ways of doing things that just kind of set yourself free. This change the mindset, the way of living, going out, learning things. And it's almost like if you can learn from your experience in the world and you're always getting feedback from it, then you're going to be in a much better place. And so that's a really cool thing. So we did that course over 12 weeks and I was unbelievably blown away by the results. And so I just kept offering it until recently I decided I was going to stop, because what happens is I really liked in the first group when we had a group of people and then we all went through it together. The interesting thing was we had people who had anxiety for such different ways and then asked such different questions, but people would connect with different questions so that sometimes they wished they could have asked, but someone's so much better at articulating it. And through that person getting the breakthrough, it kind of helped them get the breakthrough and gave them more food for thought. And there was so much in it like that. The course was really good. But I've decided to make it even better. By that, I'm going to kind of restructure the way I do it. And then, so we've stopped letting people do the course the last couple of months, because now I want to get a little group together and we all go through this together. So it's going to be the same content of all that stuff that was great before, but we're going to add in some extra things, a few extra webinars So for you guys, and kind of get you guys to go through it in group for those of you who want to learn more. At the end of this webinar, I'm going to take you through the page and gives you more information. And we're starting the 3rd of October in like a week and a bit. And so for anyone who's curious about learning more and being in this program, I would love to kind of share it with you. It's going to be very, very, very cool. If you get half as much as the people who have done it already, you're going to be amazed, because the course is about generative strategies. A generative strategy is something that not only works, but over time, the more you use it, the better it gets. And so the more you have that works for you, that gets better over time, and you had another little strategy that gets better over time, and you keep doing these things, pretty soon you kind of go, wow. And I could amaze you and spend the whole time, this whole hour, just reading the testimonials and the case stories and the breakthroughs. In fact, the reason when I did these webinars, I always spent the first couple of minutes talking about some of the changes that were happening in people's lives. And so we wouldn't have time. That's cool. But one of the particular stories that I like is from this lady who was all the way over in France, and she did this course. And she was in a certain place, and she asked great questions throughout the course. But recently, I've just been in contact with her. She's in such an amazing place. It's like when she was telling me about what she was doing and how she's living her life, and the direction of her life is in such a different place. And it was amazing. And so I'm like, well, really, where did that all happen? What happened? And she said it was this course was the thing that was that turning point in her life. To me, that was so exciting to know that the transformation that I can make in my clinic, we can do online. So for those of you who can't get to me or can't afford me at the clinic, and you just kind of want this, it's just the most amazing thing. I'm so proud to be able to offer this for you guys. I see a question right now, so I'm just going to read the question and we'll see if we want to answer it. And then for anyone else, if you have a question, go for it. Okay, this is a very, very interesting question. Okay, from Wesam. I came to you 2 years ago and my anxiety is totally gone. And now I've got it back of anxiety because I lost control on the things that I've learned from you. What do you suggest? Interesting. That's why I created this course. That was the thing that prompted me to do it. Like why I wrote the book. You see, I had a client and she would have these one-on-ones with me. And she would learn some of these concepts. But what happens is in the half an hour, there were so many concepts that we were sharing, so many that often people don't take notes, and then they walk away and they kind of go, I kind of forgot. What did you say? Or they wrote me an email. Can you summarize it? I'm thinking, we talked about so much. And so what happens is I'm like, at least with the webinars, what happens is everything is recorded. All the principles are recorded. So if all of a sudden what happens is your focus shifts out of being in this amazing space and you start doing the destructive behaviors or thinking the destructive thoughts or being in an environment in a way that's causing you pain and unconscious of what you're doing, these webinars can act as things that break you out of these patterns. And the thing is, you have this information for life once you've signed up. It's like the most amazing thing. And clients tell me, they're saying, I was doing really well and then something happened. So I just looked in some of your webinars. I was just listening to it in the car, or I was just tapped on for a little bit, and it made such a difference. And I love hearing that. And because the idea is it gives you principles. There's so many, you don't need to remember them all because they're all there. And then as you go through it, you'll find the ones that resonate with you most. And so it's like a resource, like a massive data dump of all the magic, the big breakthrough ideas that I've helped with clients, and then vroom, and for you guys. All right, so that's pretty much it for me. I don't see any more questions. Thank you everyone for coming. We've made the course super cheap. As I was saying before, like a one-on-one with me is $150, and then it would be like, that times 12 is like very expensive, but the course works out at $30 a webinar, a session over 12 weeks is $360 for the whole thing. Someone asked, what's the title of my book? How to Break Free from Anxiety, a Transformational Guide to Wellness. Our interesting thing about this book is what I really wanted to write and call it when I was kind of in the draft stage was called The Gift of Anxiety. And I talk about this in the course, the gift of anxiety. And it may seem like the stupid thing to what's the gift of anxiety? My clients who get through the other side break free. All of a sudden, they're able to look back and say, because of going through that experience, even if it was horrible and painful, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, I've learned so much about myself and the world that I wouldn't give that up for the world because of so much that I've grown from it. The way I appreciate the world right now is so different. And that happens a lot. And so I think a big part of anxiety, from what I've observed over and over and over again, is in some way your body is helping you become more aware, more conscious, and being able to break free. And is about learning to listen to them. So I really wanted to call it The Gift of Anxiety, but I realized most people are not ready for a book like that. You got to get to it. So the course that if you guys want to do, Wellness Mindset Mastery, is really gets you to that point. This book is How to Break Free from Anxiety. Amazing. You guys, thank you so much for being here, for being present. If you have questions, email me. I'm here to help. I love my job. I love seeing people transform. And the coolest thing is when someone gets good, that's great. And then someone goes to the next level, goes from good to great, that's great. And then one goes great to excellent. It's like we just keep getting better and better because strategies are generative. With that being said, I want to thank you guys so much, and I hope the rest of your night, if you're in New Zealand like me and it is nighttime, or if you're overseas and it's morning, hope the rest of your day is amazing, and we will speak to you soon. Stay on, and if you have any questions, ask me by email. See you later.